As you can imagine, I frequently find myself in the company of other family members like myself, family members who lost a loved one on September 11, 2001. You see, on that morning, my big brother Joe went to work early. He had an office on the 103rd floor of the North Tower for Cantor Fitzgerald. At 8:46 in the morning, my brother Joe vanished into thin air. It's within conversations with these other family members that they'll sometimes mention the fact that they had a sign, a sign like a rainbow or a butterfly or a bird, or even a series of events that convinced them that they were in the presence of their loved one or watching the workings of their loved one behind the scenes to let them know that they were there. And I would always smile politely, nod my head in acknowledgement that they were speaking to me, but quite honestly, in my mind, I was rolling my eyes. You see, I'm a very pragmatic, logical, methodical thinker. I need proof of things. A puzzle piece has to fit. I'm a big prove-it-to-me guy. Even in my plumbing profession, we think of problems in a ladder pattern, and we don't reach for the next rung unless we have an answer or proof of the first. Something else about me is I'm somebody that was haunted and plagued by a horrible, reoccurring nightmare that began shortly after September 11th. It was exactly the same. It would start with me standing at the base of a mountain looking up. In front of me was a wide swath of a path all the way to the top. On both sides was a definitive line of trees like an impenetrable forest that made going up the only way to go. On this path were these rocks, of outcroppings of rocks, and on them were these creatures. They were horrible, vicious, evil, wolf-like creatures, and they scared the hell out of me. And at the top of the mountain was my brother Joe, and Joe never said a word. And without fail, somewhere along my climb, I would always slip and helplessly slide into the grasp of one of these creatures. And once one had me, it gave a green light for all the other creatures to come off their perches, and they would all set upon me at once. I would usually awaken as they were ripping and tearing me apart. I would sometimes awaken hearing a distant voice or a scream, and as I became more awake, I would realize they were my own. I'd usually be sitting up in bed, covered in sweat, terrified to the point where I couldn't even formulate a word. I would go from scared to confused to angry to sad. In 2006, I was approached by a group called Tuesday's Children. Tuesday's Children is an organization that was formed in the days after September 11th. Their original goal was to be advocates for the children who lost a mother or father on September 11th. They've evolved, and I'm still to this day very active with them. They wanted to know if I was interested in going on an outward-bound Colorado adventure with other family members. And I remember I didn't hesitate. I jumped at the chance. And that August, we all made our way to Leadsville, Colorado. Leadsville, Colorado has the distinction of being the highest incorporated city in the nation, almost 2 miles up into the air. The first 2 days were used to get acclimated to each other, to camp life, and to the altitude because we were above 10,000 feet. And on the third day, we packed up our belongings and we began our trek into the deep woods. And almost immediately, we came upon a river, and there was an older gentleman fly fishing. And even though I told him I had no fishing gear, he insisted on giving me a fishing fly. And he said, "This will work in these waters." And I shrugged my shoulders and I thanked him for his gift, and we continued that hike. And that hike is something I label one of my life's beautiful moments. My life's beautiful moments can be defined by the fact that my brain seems to be consciously aware of whatever I'm doing or whatever I'm seeing at that instant is in some inexplicable way extra special. And I have a realization that I will never forget it. It's as if my brain makes a wrinkle just for that memory, and it'll never fade, it'll never go away. And we were hiking. It was sometime after lunch. We were on a trail, and there was a stream on our left side. We came upon a huge log jam that formed a natural bridge over the stream. And we used that bridge to get ourselves and our gear over to the other side. And we went through a small clearing into the woods a short distance, and we built our our new home base that was going to be our leap-off point for the next couple of days. And when we were told that we still had a little bit of free time, little Jimmy MacGyver got a long, flexible stick, got my gift of the fishing fly, and I got my 12 yards of dental floss because I knew I could do without dental floss for a few days. And I was going to go back to that stream and catch some trout that I had seen earlier for some fresh dinner. When I came out of the woods into that small clearing again, now I was facing that log jam where we had just come from. But from this vantage point, I could see what was beyond that log jam. It was a huge, steep mountain. It had a wide swath of a path cut from the bottom all the way to the top. There was a definitive line of trees on the right, a definitive line of trees on the left. I immediately became frozen because I knew without doubt that this was the mountain in my dreams. This was the mountain in my nightmare. This was Joe's mountain. I wanted to call out to the others, but I had never told anybody about this nightmare, except for my wife. So I didn't say a word. In fact, a short time after September 11th, I noticed something. When I would speak of my brother Joe, even to my closest friends, and for different reasons, even to my wife, I would see how uncomfortable they would become. So to save their discomfort, I stopped speaking about my brother. That night, after dinner, we built a big campfire. And then you can imagine, in that setting, with those people, there was a lot of what I call emotional kumbaya moments. There was a lot of crying. There was some laughter. There was some anger. When it was my turn to speak and I felt comfortable enough, I told the others about my nightmare and what I had found that afternoon. And that's when we were told by the guide that that mountain was one we were scheduled to climb. So that very next morning, we put on our day packs and we set out at dawn. And dawn proved to be a crisp, clear, beautiful morning. And we hiked for hours. And we were only about halfway up. And when I have what I consider to be a complete breakdown. For some reason, I went from crying to wailing to dropping to my knees and making guttural sounds I had never made before. The others with me were great. They hugged me. They cried with me. And together we all got to the top of that mountain, and that top of that mountain was absolutely spectacular. It was glorious being up on that mountain. On the top of that mountain, we had discovered that somebody had left a pickle jar up there with folded up notes inside of it. I found a pen and paper, and I wrote down my thoughts and prayers to my brother Joe. One thing I will share with you is that I promised him I would never, ever let him be forgotten. You know, standing up here and reliving the nightmares for you, the one I was asleep for and especially the one I was awake for, is still, it hurts inside. But something more than my discomfort, I hope, happens here today. If you all remember my story, if you remember my face, if you remember my nightmare, you, in a small way, will remember my brother Joe. And maybe today I'll make some wrinkles in some of your brains for the memory of Joseph Michael Giaccone. And he will not have vanished, and he will never fade away. Some of you might have guessed, after that day, I never had that nightmare ever again. Because on the mountain that day, I found my proof. Thank you very much.